I don't remember the exact moment my childhood ended. Some people can point to a date, a season, a moment where innocence slipped through their fingers. For me, it wasn't a single second. It was a slow collapse, a steady crumbling of walls I didn't even know were holding my world together. But if I had to choose one memory that marked the beginning of the end, it was the night my father forced my mother and me out of the house like we were strangers, intruding on his perfectly polished life. Back then I was 15, small for my age, always clutching a notebook full of ideas and sketches. My mother, Elena, worked long hours at a bakery just outside Rosewood Heights, a quiet suburban town surrounded by stretches of forest that turned crimson in autumn. Our house wasn't grand, but it was warm, until my father turned it into a place where every footstep felt like a risk. His name was Charles Donovan. To the outside world, he was a respectable businessman. Pressed shirts, polished shoes, firm handshake. At home, a storm. Quick to anger. Quick to blame. Quick to make us feel like everything we did was somehow wrong. The night everything changed, my mother tried to hide the tremor in her hands as she packed our things into 2 worn-out suitcases. I stood near the doorway, my throat tight, watching her slide folded clothes into one of the bags with a stiffness that betrayed how exhausted she was, not physically, but emotionally. "Mom," I whispered, "we don't have to go. He's just angry. He'll calm down." She paused and looked at me with eyes swollen from tears she had been holding back for years. "Lena, sweetheart, he's not going to calm down. Not this time." Downstairs, Charles was pacing between the living room and the kitchen, muttering to himself, slamming cabinet doors as if punishing them for existing. It all started with an argument over something absurd. A bill? A missing receipt? I don't even remember. But arguments in our house rarely stayed about what they started with. They always exploded into something bigger, something uglier. When Mom and I walked downstairs with the suitcases, Charles stopped pacing and turned toward us, his expression a mixture of triumph and annoyance. "Good," he said. "You finally learned to listen. Get out. I'm done supporting dead weight." I remember clenching my fists. "We're your family," he scoffed. "No, not anymore." He didn't even wait for us to step onto the porch before shutting the door behind us, the lock clicking like a final verdict. The night was colder than I expected. I stood there, staring at the door that used to lead to my bedroom, my books, my childhood drawings taped to the wall. Everything we owned, the real things, the meaningful things, were still inside. Except us. Mom took my hand. "We'll be okay," she whispered, as if repeating it enough times might make it true. We stayed at a rundown motel that smelled of damp carpet and cigarette smoke. Mom cried in the bathroom with the faucet running so I wouldn't hear. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard everything. In the morning, she made a decision that would change both our lives. We left Rosewood Heights. No forwarding address, no goodbye, nothing to tie us to the man who chose pride over family. Years passed, hard years. We moved from town to town, trying to build a life from scratch. Mom worked 2 jobs most of the time. I finished school while helping wherever I could. But something inside me hardened. A quiet flame, small at first, then brighter, then scorching. I promised myself I would never be powerless again. I would never let someone decide my worth. What I didn't know then was that the path I chose, the career I built, the success that followed, would one day put my face on millions of screens across the country, including the screen in the house where Charles Donovan still lived. And when he saw me, when he realized who I had become, he froze, because the daughter he threw out into the cold grew into a woman the entire country wanted to listen to. But before that day came, there were years of struggle, ascent, breakthroughs, betrayals, and choices that shaped the person I am now. And it all began with that night under the street lamp, holding a suitcase and my mother's trembling hand. Life after Rosewood Heights wasn't easy. Mom and I became experts at disappearing, at blending into quiet neighborhoods where no one asked questions. Every apartment we rented felt temporary. Every town just another dot on the map where we could rebuild, even if only a little. Mom worked nights at a diner, then early mornings at a cleaning service. I went to school, kept my head down, avoided attention. I learned quickly that invisibility was a shield. But invisibility comes with its own costs. I carried anger like a second skin. Not loud, not explosive, just simmering underneath, ready to flare if anyone crossed me. Mom noticed it sometimes, especially when I slammed a locker door or punched a pillow in my room. She never judged. She just let me have my space, knowing the world had been cruel enough already. High school brought new challenges. I made friends slowly, always testing the waters, measuring trust. People were curious about the quiet girl who moved every year, but I deflected questions with practiced smiles. And yet the past followed me. Every time I saw a house with a porch light flicker in the evening, I imagined it was him watching, judging, remembering. Charles Donovan never left my mind. Not really. I started writing. Pages and pages of thoughts, sketches, plans. I told myself that words could be sharper than fists, that my brain could be my strongest weapon. And maybe it was. My essays won awards. My art caught attention. Teachers noticed my intensity, that strange fire behind my quiet demeanor. I didn't care. I only cared about proving someday that I was more than what he threw out into the cold. Mom encouraged me quietly. "Lena," she said once as we painted a new apartment, "don't let him touch your story. Live it on your own terms." I nodded, feeling the weight of every word. It was advice, a mantra, a warning. Then came the scholarship letters, the university acceptance, the first real taste of independence. Mom cried the day I left for college. I hugged her tight, not because I needed comfort. I needed her to know she had succeeded. That despite everything, we survived. And more than survived, we thrived. Years went by. I studied hard, learned negotiation, communication, storytelling. I discovered the power of media, how a voice, a face, a story could reach millions. I became strategic, careful, deliberate. Every article I wrote, every podcast I hosted was crafted with precision. I didn't just want to succeed, I wanted influence. Not for revenge yet, not at first. Just control over my own life, the life he tried to take. And then, finally, opportunity struck. A national platform contacted me to feature my work. They wanted commentary, interviews, appearances. It was surreal. I thought about the little girl clutching a suitcase years ago, the one who feared the cold night, feared her father's anger. She would have never imagined a stage, lights, cameras, millions of viewers, and most importantly, the chance to be seen on her own terms. It happened faster than I expected. My name became known, my voice carried, and then, in a moment that froze me, the producer asked, "Would you do a segment about family dynamics, about overcoming adversity?" I agreed, not knowing that this one episode would bring the past rushing back. I walked onto the set, calm but aware. Lights, cameras, crew, all the noise and bustle I'd trained to control. And then the clip rolled. One of the first moments in my life where I realized that fate, timing, and meticulous preparation could collide in a single instant. The live feed showed a segment about resilience, featuring my own story from a carefully edited interview years earlier. And there, in the control room, I saw him. Not my mom, not my brother, not any familiar figure from my adult life. Him. Charles Donovan. He was on the same screen, a guest commentator for another channel, reacting to the segment about overcoming adversity. He froze. For a fraction of a second, time paused. The man who had thrown us out, who had reduced our lives to suitcases and cold nights, was looking at me. At the girl he had discarded, the woman who had forged herself into something unstoppable. And I saw it. The shock, the disbelief, the recognition, that tiny human crack in his armor. And in that moment, all the years of struggle, every sleepless night, every tear, every sacrifice, felt vindicated. I realized that life doesn't always hand out closure, but it does give you moments where the world can see the truth. And he, the man who once dictated our misery, was forced to watch the life he tried to destroy flourish in front of millions. I leaned back, heart racing, trying to capture every detail of his reaction, knowing that this was the first time our paths had crossed in a way where power had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I was steady, calculated, prepared. I had won something he could never take away: visibility, influence, respect. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of poetic justice. The days after that broadcast felt surreal. Everywhere I went, people recognized me, but it wasn't the fame that mattered. It was the reminder that my life had transformed completely. Mom called me constantly, worried I'd be overwhelmed, but I reassured her. I'd faced storms before. This was just another ripple in the current. Then came the messages. Emails, social media notifications, private messages. Some congratulatory, some curious, some unsettling. And among them, one notification caught my eye. A short clip sent anonymously, showing a TV segment I hadn't been fully aware of. I clicked, thinking it was another highlight of my own work. But it wasn't. It was a local news feature about a rising young actress. Her smile, the way she carried herself, her eyes. My breath caught. I leaned closer, feeling my stomach twist. That wasn't just any girl on the screen. That was my daughter, Emily. My little girl, now grown, polished, poised. Someone I hadn't seen in years, yet there she was, shining on live television. My hands shook. The room around me blurred. Memories came flooding back. The cold night we left. Her tiny hand clutching mine. The fear in her eyes. How had she gotten here? Who had raised her after that night? My mind raced, connecting fragments of a life I had been separated from. A life I thought I had lost forever. I watched her speak about charity work, about the arts, about empowerment. She seemed confident, composed, and completely unaware of the storm she had survived as a child. And then, as the segment ended, my own reflection stared back at me from the screen. The same man who had let fear and anger dictate his actions, now frozen in disbelief. For a long moment I didn't move. My heart pounded, my pulse a drumbeat echoing in my chest. Years of regret, pain, and distance collided with a single image. Emily, alive, thriving, and radiant. I wanted to reach through the screen, to call out, to explain, to reclaim a connection I'd lost. But the camera cut, and reality sank in. I had no immediate access, no instant reconciliation, just a daughter I hadn't seen in over a decade. I reached for my phone, typing her name into every platform I could think of. Social media yielded fragments, interviews, fan pages, community posts. And then finally, an email address linked to her publicist. My fingers hovered, trembling. One message could change everything, or it could shatter the fragile bridge between us. I paused. Memories of the night I had expelled my family came back sharper than ever. The anger, the pride, the misguided belief that I was protecting them by pushing them away. I hated myself for it. I had created this distance, and now, decades later, I had to face the consequences. But I also knew I couldn't hide behind regret. This was my chance, maybe my only chance, to reconnect with Emily, to show her that I had changed, that I had grown, that I understood the weight of my mistakes. I drafted the first message carefully, every word measured. I didn't demand forgiveness. I didn't promise miracles. I simply reached out as a father, humbly, painfully aware of the years lost. The reply came faster than I expected. Short, polite, cautious, but unmistakably warm. She didn't know if she could trust me yet, but she wanted to meet. My heart soared and sank at the same time. This was the moment I had feared and hoped for simultaneously, the first real step toward redemption, toward connection, toward facing the shadow of my past. That evening, I sat with Mom in the quiet of our living room. We didn't speak much. Words would have been inadequate. Instead, we let the silence hold the weight of years, letting hope and fear coexist in equal measure. Tomorrow I would see Emily. Tomorrow I would try to bridge a chasm that I had spent years building. And somewhere deep inside I realized something profound. Life had a strange way of giving you second chances, but only if you were ready to confront your own failures. I was ready. I had to be. For Emily, for myself, for the family I had once cast into the cold. The next morning my stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and dread. I dressed carefully, checking my reflection in the mirror, as though preparing for a confrontation and a reunion at the same time. The world outside seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath for what was about to happen. When I arrived at the small cafe where Emily had agreed to meet, I saw her before she noticed me. She looked older than I remembered, taller, confident, with the same spark in her eyes that had once made her smile light up the room. For a fleeting moment I froze, overwhelmed by the weight of years lost. She turned, and our eyes met. I saw the caution there, the protective walls built over years of absence, and yet beneath it, a flicker of recognition. My heart clenched. "Emily," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, offering a tentative smile. We sat across from each other, the coffee between us almost a barrier. I began slowly, carefully explaining the years that had passed, the mistakes I had made, and the regret that had shaped every decision since that fateful night. I didn't ask for forgiveness, I didn't beg. I simply told the truth. Every word weighed with sincerity. Emily listened, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable. At times she flinched, like memories of that past had surfaced in response to my words. And then she spoke. Her voice was measured, tinged with emotion I could barely contain. She asked questions, some gentle, some sharp, each one a bridge to understanding. I answered honestly. No evasions, no excuses. For the first time in decades, I felt a connection forming. Tentative, fragile, but undeniably there. She spoke of her life, of the achievements she had made, of the people who had raised her, and of the curiosity she still carried about the father she barely knew. I realized that despite my absence, she had grown into a remarkable young woman, strong, compassionate, and resilient. As our conversation deepened, the barriers between us began to crumble. Laughter returned in small doses. Memories of her childhood seeped through the cracks, and I could feel the love that had always existed, though buried under years of silence. We didn't fix everything in one meeting. Some scars would take time, and some questions might never be answered fully. But by the time we left the cafe, something fundamental had shifted. Emily reached out, touching my hand lightly, a gesture of trust and tentative reconciliation. I squeezed back gently, letting her know that I was there, that I would remain, and that I intended to be the father I had failed to be for so long. Later, I sat alone in the car, reflecting. The shock of seeing her on the screen, the flood of regret, and the confrontation with the past. It had all led to this moment. I had been given a chance to reclaim what I had lost, not through force or demands, but through honesty, patience, and the willingness to face my failures. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Emily and I would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, and to rediscover the father-daughter bond we had once taken for granted. Yet, for the first time in years, hope felt tangible, a living thing between us. As I drove home, I thought of Mom, who had weathered these storms alongside me, who had supported me even when I faltered. I made a silent promise to her and to Emily. I would never let fear or anger dictate my choices again. I would honor the family I had cast away, protect the daughter I had almost lost, and cherish every moment as if it were a gift, because in truth it was. That night, I finally allowed myself to sleep, knowing that though the past could not be undone, the future was ours to shape. And for the first time in decades, I felt whole. The screen may have revealed the years lost, but it also illuminated a path forward, one paved with redemption, love, and the unwavering bond between a father and his daughter.